I will be slightly quieter. I'm sorry. I'm going to continue the case of first opposition on 3 very simple things. I will analyze the mental instability and show why and how it has caused the crime and didn't allow for any other alternative. After that, I will ask who is actually responsible for the murder, and then I will ask what was the intent and show there was no criminal intent in this murder. Before that, a bit of rebuttal. I'm sorry, I'm saving the best part of the rebuttal to the end. So let's begin with the slippery slope that Greg has shown us, which was a very nice continuation of what Nati says, everything influences. And we say, yes, everything which influences as significantly as a lifetime of abuse is a good enough thing to take into consideration in a member in a trial. We think that is perfectly fine. It's amazing, stupendous amount of mental influence and should be taken into account. Do people have the equal rights when they're the beater and the beatee? First of all, we don't think the beater has equal rights. He's a bloody mess of a person, if a person at all. But he still has the same equal rights in the eye of the law. That means that if he committed a crime, he should stand trial. And if the person committed a crime over him, then that person will be responsible if he is responsible in the eye of the law. Same equal rights. Same thing, there are no equal rights. But about vigilantism. Now, the word that Greg never heard of, obviously, is extenuating circumstances, because Greg believes that there is never anything that can happen which will allow any crime whatsoever. And we think that Greg has completely failed the reality of the legal system, in which we say sometimes crimes are not good, they are not okay, but we understand why they happen, and while we think this is a crime, we don't think the person should be punished for it. This is not vigilantism any more than any other part of our legal system which allow for extenuating circumstances. That's in Hebrew, I forgot what it is in Hebrew. And last thing. Yes, Adina already explained to you that the majority of the cases aren't 10 years later. But you know what? Even if it is 10 years later, as long as there's mental influence, as long as the influence of the actions still remain, we see this as still relevant. Where do we see this? In Israel, where we account for shell shock 30 years after the war. Why? Because it is still there. It doesn't matter when it happened, as long as the damages and the reasons and the things that caused it are still there. It doesn't have to be yesterday. It just has to have happened. And so, my positive material, mental instability. Now, Adina has shown you pretty well why the woman is mentally unstable. I will explain to you how she is mentally unstable. I will explain to you very simply. First of all, she's a broken woman. She has no feeling of control of her own life. That accounts for what Ohad said, that she has any judgment. She doesn't have any judgment because she doesn't view herself as a viable tool to act. She has no feeling of self-worth. Oli already explained she is totally subjugated and isolated, so that accounts also for that social contact thing. But what is important? The focus of this feeling. The focus is the beater. He is the focus of the feeling, and in order for the feeling to be removed, he needs to be removed. That is what she feels. She cannot be better without him being removed. Now, first thing, let's account for premeditation. It's not easy for it. What you consider premeditation is what we consider getting the will to act, thinking about it, imagining itself. If you have no feeling of worth or ability, then you need to imagine and plan ahead just to get the ability to break yourself free. So yes, we think there is here premeditation, but it is part of the mental sickness. It is not a criminal premeditation. But more than that, it needs to be done in order to gain your will and gain your feeling of ability. But the most important part is it needs to be done by myself, because if someone else comes and rescues me from this, then I have not gained any ability. I am still not a person by my own right. And so we see the most important part. There is no other alternative in her eyes. She does not see herself as viable unless she frees herself, and again, she becomes a whole person. Yes.
The fact that some battered persons do not murder their beater and solve it otherwise proves that it is not an absolute,
Thank you very much.
that the only way out is murder. It's choice.
We completely agree there are other options. The question is, what does she think? If in her eyes there aren't any other option, then in her eyes, in her rational thinking, which is completely rational because she is mentally unstable, then we see there was no alternative that she could see. And what does that put? Where does that put us? First of all, as I shown, it answers all the criteria that Ohad have shown us. But the second place it shows us is responsibility. Who's responsible for the action? Because in criminal law, especially murder law, you need to have responsibility. And we say this is a case of aggressing. In Hebrew, kintul. When someone gives you a reason, a reasonable reason to attack him, then we see that, well, again, you committed a crime, but you're exempt from the punishment. Why? Because he is responsible to your attack. And we believe here you have classical aggressing, because he put her in this corner. He put her in the situation, and so he has created the grounds for the crime. He is the aggressor. He is the one responsible for the crime. And the intent, her intent, again, is not criminal. She doesn't want to kill him. She wants to free herself. She's so desperate for such a desperate act to restore her own humanity that the only way she sees to do it is by killing him. She doesn't want to kill him. At most cases, she still loves him, or at least appreciates him. She certainly sees him as a bigger person. But in order to regain her self-control, which is the intent, which is what she is trying to achieve, then she has to do it. And so even her intent is not to commit a crime, but to do something completely needed. And so we see that in the basic point, she is mentally unstable. And mental instability is ground for someone not to be punished in a trial. But beyond that, the basic need for a murder trial, the question of responsibility for the crime and intent in doing the crime, do not stand on the side of oh, well, whatever, forgot the word. And so she is guilty of the crime, but she shouldn't be punished in the crime. That's extenuating circumstances, and so we beg you to oppose the motion.